Charlie, let's start with you, if we can. This is the front page of the Daily Mail. We were talking about this earlier. This is about Angela Rayner. This won't go away for her. And the big headline this morning, Rayner on the ropes. How much trouble is she in here?
I think she's in a lot of trouble. I mean, you're just hearing the weather there. It's raining on Rayner's parade.
Very good.
If I can start things off in that style. Not only because of the allegations itself, you know, avoiding capital gains tax, potentially avoiding or receiving single person's discount in one of her homes when there was an allegation that her brother was living in that property anyway, so she wasn't a single person there. And obviously being registered in terms of the electoral roll in two different places and not being quite sure where she's voting. Now, the fact that she is going to potentially go on to be not just Deputy Prime Minister, but Secretary of State for Levelling Up, Housing and Communities, that deals with local authorities and councils, and so housing as well. She'd be responsible for the very policies of which she's being accused of breaching. So it is very, very, very difficult for her, I think, at the moment, and we'll just have to see how this plays out. She will, I'm sure, at some point have to publish the advice that she claims that she's received. It can't be a tit for tat, as she claimed. No one's asking for those records over 15 years, as she tried to claim yesterday. They just want to know what advice did she receive on this particular issue. And I think if she did publish that, the whole thing could very quickly go away. But the fact she's not doing that means that it's going to run and run. Isn't
that part of the problem, Candice, that the Labour Party often sort of drag their heels a little bit or maybe slightly misread the room and then the stories balloon?
Yes, yeah, well, they've just kind of wanted to put this to bed. You know, they've tried to dismiss it as a smear. She's just being smeared. But I think there's genuine questions to answer here. I mean, those living arrangements do seem unusual to a lot of people. So, I mean, that needs to be clarified. And we also, like Charlie said, we need to know what this tax advice was. I mean, she's saying, I got advice on this. It's all perfectly legitimate. OK, so what was the advice?
I mean, also, Charlie, the great irony for me is she bought it under right to buy, which, of course, was a Conservative policy. But you're right. And what the Daily Mail says here is she may have dodged not only the tax, but may have broken the law. That is very serious indeed. And I think they have to... And it's a really interesting point you made, that she's saying, oh, well, now we have to publish 15 years of tax returns. No, you don't, actually. Just show us the documentation about your purchase of your house and the sale of that house.
Exactly so. And the fact that she's called several times for Tory MPs to reveal their sort of tax requirements, that's one thing. The fact that she's criticised Right to Buy, exactly that Margaret Thatcher's one of her cornerstone policies, which she sold this house under. It just smells of hypocrisy. It smells of her...
There's no criticism that she used the policy once it was there and it was in place. I mean, I think we've got to moved on from that level, haven't we? I think it's the problems are, and Rebecca Hudson in the last sort of half an hour was saying, we don't want to pry too much into someone's personal life. So how do we do that but make sure, in terms of the politics and the law, all the boxes are ticked?
Well, I think you've got to, in a case like this, you've just got to be upfront about it. You've either got to actually, frankly, own it, and if a mistake has been made, be very clear to the public, I made a mistake, I've paid the money back in some way, or I've worked with HMRC to sort of tackle the problem. And by the way, Angela, to be fair to her, she's a good communicator. She does connect with a lot of people, and she's able to do so because she's seen as relatively normal. She did have, she's had a very, very difficult, upbringing. She's been very open about that. And I think she could actually use that to her advantage to say, look, I was a single parent, I've got 2 kids, I had very different living arrangements to most families in the UK. Yeah. That was the problem, and I'm sorry I was registered maybe at 2 different houses. But you can apologise. You can own the situation.
Yes, that's right. But has she gone from asset, which I totally agree with, has she, Candice, gone from an asset now to a liability? Because the Labour Party is very quick to say Tory sleaze, Tory sleaze, Tory sleaze. This is looking like Labour sleaze.
Well, this is the thing. That's kind of what you get a Labour politician on, is sort of hypocrisy over tax. Because most Labour politicians will say Tory cuts have damaged the country, and then if they're seen in some way not to be totally honest about their tax affairs, then it's sort of reputation loss, and it's very, very hard to restore that.
Let's talk about reputations. Front page of the Telegraph. Sunak, the Prime Minister, has been blasted for handing a knighthood to a businessman who, surprise, surprise, donated £5 million to the Conservative Party. Plus lots of other charitable donations. We were talking about that as well. How much of a problem really is it?
I'm not sure. Well, this comes on the back of the Frank Hester scandal. So, I mean, this is just another donor controversy for the Conservative Party, where, they're seen to be taking money from people, they're rewarding them for things, for failure. And I think this is a surprise list. So people are saying, well, why now? Why is he announcing this now when really, you know, the rest of the people on the list, it just seems like they're trying to give this list credibility. You know, it's the director of Oppenheimer, for instance, Esther and Philip Davies. It's also raising questions about the summer election. Is he trying to shore up support for a summer election? Because people are saying, why now? Why this particular timing?
So why do you think now?
I think that could be something quite credible. I mean, you're looking at the May 2nd elections. What's the outcome of that going to be? If they're not very good, you could start seeing leadership shenanigans going on. So maybe Sunak is thinking, well, perhaps I need to start considering my options here and I need to contract things a little bit.
Is that right, Charlie? Has Sunak reached the point of no return? So normally the honours are at New Year, the King's birthday. This is aberrant in its timing. Is this, and James was just saying the election in his view, and he was very specific, November the 14th. When's the election going to happen? Or is Sunak going to do something we don't expect and call a snap election?
Well, I think, I mean, there are lots of dates that fly around. I thought it could be October the 14th, actually, because I thought the government wanted to avoid a clash with the US election, so to get it done slightly before. And, you know, the conference season, which is end of September, early October, that could be the platform to sort of, you know, really galvanise the country and focus the minds of the public during conference season to then go into an election, which could be mid to late October. But, you know, November's a date. There are many other dates.
There are many other dates, but one of the big issues for Rishi Sunak is stop the boats. It's one of those 5 pledges. The front page of The Sun this morning, Rishi told to get tough after the poll. The polls, the latest one for The Sun, is catastrophic, I would say, for the Conservative Party. Now, they have to stop the boats, and this is all about the ECHR. And I think people watching this morning will be thinking, I do not understand why, when we've passed a piece of legislation, the illegal migration bill, what are they all still doing in this country?
Well, the 2 things on that is, the first is that Labour, in that poll conducted by the Sun as part of, never mind the ballots that was on last night, put Labour ahead, marginally ahead in terms of trust, in terms of over the Tories when it comes to stopping the small boats. Now, that's extraordinary because the Labour Party seem to have done everything and gone out of their way to block the Rwanda bill and to block migration policy. So you've got to question that poll versus the reality of what's happening on the ground. But you're right in the sense that, you know, in order to win the next election, if the Tories are going to do it, they've got to be able to deliver what they've said they're going to do. Whether you agree with Rwanda or not, you've got to see those planes take off the ground. In terms of the AHCR, I think what people get into a sort of sticky situation about is whether, you know, we have to leave or remain, or we have to stay in or we have to come out of this, we have to rip that up or rewrite that. What you can do is actually try and just, you know, accept that maybe the AHCR was fit for, you know, 75 years ago. It might not be for now. So we as a whole European continent, whether you're in the EU or not, but just as nations, have to rewrite some of these older rules to make sure that they are fit for purpose for the 21st century, whilst remaining and adhering to our human rights laws and all the rest of it, all the great things that Britain has achieved and demonstrated across the world.